Welcome back, comrades. This is Gaming with Austin, and today we're on to episode 19 of the Utopian Community Series. Episode 19. Bombs away! What ultimately stops you from being truly free. Some of our freedoms are actually constrained by international laws. Some of them think they're above the law, when in fact their powers are ultimately limited by international conventions. Like the Geneva Convention. The reason there are international laws to ultimately limit the power of politicians around the world. Remember what happened when Hitler held absolute power in Nazi Germany? Yeah. There are laws regarding crimes against humanity. Yeah. The reason you cannot be truly free, like achieve true freedom, is that there are international laws. The biggest constraint with trying to achieve true freedom is the biggest problem is international law restricts some of those freedoms around the world. My definition of free speech any speech that you're allowed to say that is not hateful towards sexual orientation, ethnic group, religious group, anything. Any speech that is not hateful. Like, Like, not all Christians go to church every day. One thing that happens, people abuse. One of the problems with being truly free is that political leaders that are truly free end up committing human rights abuses. Oops. There's nothing free about the free market. Because the unequal distribution of power is a pretty big problem. There are people out there who are power hungry. Those who think they can get away with their actions. One thing they don't understand is that one thing a lot of power-hungry people understand, one thing they do not understand is that every action they do has a consequence. The unequal distribution of political power is what's going to happen if income inequality gets worse. And if it keeps growing, America and possibly the rest of the world would go from, if they're already democratic, they'd go from democracy to plutocracy to autocracy. In the plutocracy stage, things would speed up to totalitarianism. Basically, America and the rest of the developed world would go into totalitarian plutocracy. Basically, the working class would be stripped of their political power. And ultimately, they'd be stripped of their right to vote. Then the power would only go to those who, then eventually the working class, the proletariat, would be stripped of their power. And even their right to vote. And even the right to form unions. And Hitler, the Nazis, helped to make the rich richer by straight up abolishing trade unions. When he ruled Germany. He helped the rich get richer by straight up abolishing trade unions. What we need to do is regulate our trade unions. That's what we need to do. Regulate our trade unions. The abolition of trade unions helped further the Nazis into becoming power-hungry. Some bad people do good things too. Hitler was mostly evil, but he did a handful of good things. He helped fix Germany's economy, but in a really bad way. He did it in a really bad way. If Hitler wouldn't appoint a chancellor, he'd have thrown a hissy fit, just like Donald Trump would if he wasn't elected president, or if he... Donald Trump's known for throwing hissy fits in the White House. No one is to be above the law. Not even politicians should be above the law. What we need to do is redistribute the power. Redistribute the power. You know, whenever there's not enough food, people have no choice but to compete. Like when there's a famine, it's really hard to get food. Even if you do have the money for food. Eventually, food would be really hard to come by if we did nothing about it, except for cannibalism, and that's about it. Now, it wouldn't be a fun time if we resorted to it wouldn't be fun if we resorted to cannibalism. If you're out in the desert with someone else, you're out of food, you end up losing not only a lot of fat deposits, but also muscle mass too. You'd have no choice but to resort to cannibalism. You'd have no choice but to resort to cannibalism. Some of the political powers of the government of America, it's mainly limited by the Constitution. But some of the powers are actually limited by international laws too. Some of those powers are also limited by international law. Like laws regarding terrorism. Both state terrorism, organized terrorism, and state-sponsored terrorism. Ultimately, the one who is to blame for the 9/11 attacks are actually the American government. Like, one thing Republicans are trying to do to stay in power, they're trying to strip power from the Democrats. The newly elected Democrats. If Hitler wasn't appointed chancellor, he would have stripped power from his political rivals. He would have stripped power from his political rivals and tried to oust them. That's how power hungry he was. Hitler was a power hungry jerk. The reason why Israel secured their borders is to protect them from Palestine. The organization, like with Israel, Israel was formed just after World War II as the Jewish homeland of the Jews. Which kind of pissed off the Arabs. Which meant Palestine was formed as a way to get revenge. What needs to be done is there needs to be a treaty between Israel and Palestine. And eventually, between Israel and Palestine, war broke out, which meant soldiers they had no choice. The government had no choice but to conscript soldiers. If World War III breaks out, my brother would probably end up being forced into the military. If I was in the military, even though I'm like really skinny, even though I'm like pretty skinny compared to my brother, there's no need to fat shame him. There is no need to fat shame him. As it's not very nice. There are overweight people that are metabolically healthy. Like, just like how Homer Simpson's overweight. My brother's not the only overweight person around. I myself was once overweight. I was overweight, actually. I went from being overweight, I used to weigh about 260 pounds. I went down to about 170. Corpse Grinder from Cannibal Corpse. He is actually overweight. He has a lot of muscle and fat in his body. He's sort of built like a sumo wrestler. The reason why people who lose a lot of weight ultimately end up gaining it back is because back in the Stone Age, weight loss was like cutting down on your food would have been a threat to your survival. Not all overweight people eat a lot, too. There are people out there who are at a healthy weight, yet eat very little. Those people usually have a slower metabolism than normal. Everybody has different physiological needs whenever it goes to food, water, and shelter. Whenever it goes to the amount of food they eat. Not all people can survive on 1,000 calories a day without being severely emaciated, such as those with hyperthyroidism. An isocaloric diet is a diet in which you eat the same amount as your body burns off. Hypercaloric diet means you eat more than your body burns off. Hypocaloric diet means you eat less than what how much your body burns off. Since I'm slowly gaining muscle, eventually, if I want more muscle, I'd have to eat more. If I end up gaining back my weight, all that weight I've lost, I'd do it mostly in muscle. because I want to gain it back in fat. Being overweight was kind of a struggle for me. Because one of the consequences of eating a lot of foods that are mostly sugar and carbs, like the amount of carbs is very high relative to the other nutrients like fats and proteins. Problem is diabetes. I used to have diabetes. I actually did struggle with diabetes. My current state of my diabetes is I'm on remission. I was able to go on remission. Early intervention can do the trick. And it's not just overweight people that are at a higher risk of diabetes. The elderly are at risk too. And if you have family members with diabetes, like there are factors that affect your risk of diabetes that you have no control over. Like genetics. Just like there are factors of obesity you have no control over. Certain medications can cause people to become overweight. How? When I was younger, I was on Remeron. To help treat my autism, but instead of it treating my autism, it caused me to gain weight relatively quickly. Maybe they should have put me on testosterone then. So I could be huge and bulky. Like muscular. Instead of short and chubby. Instead of being short and chubby, sort of, I would have been huge and bulky. Like lifting and doing deadlifts. Why it's so hard to lose weight? It's easier to gain weight than it is to lose weight. Eating less, for some of us, it can be a threat to your survival. Not all people can be at a healthy weight, can eat survive on 1,000 calories a day. Not all people can. Some, regardless of their weight, some of us would have to eat about 3,000 calories to maintain a healthy weight. Your healthy BMI also depends on your height. Taller people are usually in the overweight range when it goes to their BMI. The reason for their overweight, their high BMI, is they need that extra weight. Like, if they had if a 7'6" tall person like Yao Ming was at about 210 pounds, he or she would have been probably be emaciated, or maybe about 190. They need that extra bulk in both fat and muscle. Our fat deposits are not only useful in helping us survive a famine, they also act as a lubricant to your organs too. Lube 'em up, boys! That's one of my favorite references from Jackass 3D. Anyways, this is it for this video. Don't forget to leave a like if you like this video, dislike if you disliked it, subscribe for more, share this with your comrades on social media, and as always, thank you for watching, and peace out.